countries around the world, including my own organization, Diverse Voices in Action for Equality in Fiji. Around the world today, lesbians, bisexuals, transgender people, and others with diverse sexual orientation and gender identities are targets of brutal violence and psychological violence. We are subject to harassment, assault, and other forms of violence, and too often under the guise of so-called honor, tradition, families, and nations. This violence remains invisible, unaddressed, and the perpetrators, whether they're members of family and communities, of police or other state or non-state actors, far too often go unpunished. This impunity must be ended and the invisibility challenged, including here at CSW57. And even where there are laws to protect against such violence, the data from various regions shows that sexism, misogyny, homophobia and transphobia continue, with patterns of abuse that include brutal extrajudicial killings, sexual assault, violence in families and communities, bullying, harassment, and various other forms of violence. But the data collection itself is still a challenge, because lesbians still often do not report violence because of distrust of the very systems and people that should be protecting us, and because of fear of reprisals or threats to confidentiality. In addition, activists are targeted every day for the defense of rights related to sexual orientation and gender identity. Our offices are raided, there is harassment of staff and volunteers, legal registration of organizations are often denied. Many defenders are arrested and in prison right now. We suffer violations and are otherwise harassed. For decades, LGBT and women's groups around the world have been demanding that this violence and discrimination be prevented and denounced, and the perpetrators brought to justice. Within the UN system, there is now an undeniable trend toward addressing all forms of violence related to sexual orientation and gender identity. As far back as 1997, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women noted that women who live outside of heterosexuality are at heightened risk of reprisals. Other UN Special Rapporteurs have also reported on acts of violence and discrimination in all regions of the world, committed against us because of sexual orientation and gender identity. The Secretary General has also repeatedly raised his voice on this issue. Over the past 20 years, 6 United Nations treaty bodies, including the Human Rights Committee, the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the Committee Against Torture, and the Committee on the Elimination of all forms of violence against women, or CEDAW, have addressed violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation. In 2011, the Human Rights Council approved a resolution on violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity that's led to a detailed report from the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. There have also been General Assembly resolutions on extrajudicial executions that note these concerns, as well as regional resolutions from the Organization of American States and the Council of Europe. It is worth noting that the Holy See has also stated its concern about violence against homosexual persons in the General Assembly. I thank you.